Effective immediately, your entire department's budget is being redirected to Project Helios. That's the sentence Brad led with, no hello, no context, just a verbal guillotine dropped in a glass conference room where someone had the nerve to order mini croissants. I'd skipped lunch for that meeting. Should have brought popcorn instead. Across the table, Brad was glowing like a discount light therapy lamp, early 40s, too much hair gel, and that high school debate team smirk that said I've rehearsed this in the mirror. I kept my expression flat, but inside, a bonfire. I'd built that team from nothing. We'd saved the company's ass twice, once during a vendor compliance crisis that could have landed us on the front page of Bloomberg, and again when the onboarding automation nearly took out payroll. But sure, let's give our funding to Brad's AI wet dream and a pack of contractors who think JSON is a personality test. And before you ask, he added, folding his arms like a game show host waiting for applause, we have friends in finance. They're on board. I smiled. It wasn't real. It was the kind of smile you make at a snake right before you chop its head off. Oh, great, I said. Sounds visionary. I left the room before I said something regrettable like you're a one-man compliance risk in loafers. I took the elevator alone, didn't cry, didn't scream, just stared at the floor numbers blinking past, my badge clipped to my chest like a joke. The humiliation hit me like cheap gin, slow but mean. All those hours, all that institutional memory, all that quiet back-end scaffolding my team had built, and they cut us loose like we were dead weight. Because Brad wanted his name on a launch deck. Because flashy beats functional now. By the time I reached my floor, I knew two things. I wasn't going to win this fight by yelling. Two, I was going to bury him with math. Hey, while we're here, quick pause. Only about 3% of folks who listen to these stories are subscribed. If you're enjoying the tale so far and want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes, tap that subscribe button and give us a like. It really helps the team keep digging up these corporate horror shows. Anyway, back at my desk, I opened a folder labeled Sunset Protocol. It wasn't dramatic. Just a collection of backup scripts, cost-tracking logs, audit compliance templates, every unglamorous skeleton that had kept our ops engine from falling apart. Brad thought he was replatforming a legacy system. What he didn't realize was I was the legacy system. And I had friends too, not loud ones, not flashy, but the kind who notice when a $200M initiative starts leaking $30K a day through poorly scoped licenses and missing invoice trails. And the best part? They all worked in finance. The last time someone underestimated me, we were 36 hours into a vendor data breach, and our CISO was Googling how to explain GDPR to the board. Meanwhile, I was holed up in a dim war room with two lukewarm Diet Cokes, reverse engineering a third-party API that had the structural integrity of wet cardboard. That breach should have buried us. It didn't because I built a firewall of workflows no one else knew how to touch. We called it the Meredith mesh in-house. It was ugly, old school, and indestructible. Every access log, every user token, every deviation from baseline behavior, I caught it before it metastasized. Brad doesn't know any of this. Brad's memory begins at what's our LinkedIn tone of voice and ends at we should try generative AI for compliance. So when he torched our systems, my systems, I didn't panic. I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Frameworks Obsolete but Not Dead. I know, not subtle. But nobody ever checks ops folders unless something's broken, and with me still quietly monitoring permissions, nothing ever looked broken. I started threading the backups, not just of tools, but evidence. Line-by-line documentation of when each cost-saving automation was implemented, where we rerouted approval loops to cut wait times by 47%, how our rekeying system dropped our vendor renewal time from 2 weeks to 2 days. Every dollar we'd saved, I tagged. Quietly. Then I printed the part that still makes me grin, a report from 2 years ago where a controller said, and I quote, "This legacy logic is annoying but effective. If we ever deprecate it, notify me personally." Her name was Marie. I'd kept the PDF. Brad didn't ask for a deprecation plan. He didn't even bother to loop in legal. Just handed everything off to his dev darlings like it was a science fair project. So I watched them dismantle the mesh, line by line. I smiled when they stripped out the compliance logging function because that little demon, buried under 3 subroutines, also timestamped vendor comms and flagged high-risk invoice patterns. You know, like the ones his new contractors were about to generate. I prepped a set of triggers. They weren't malicious, just alerting. I made sure the logs pinged a secure bucket I had read-only access to. I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. I was just collecting proof. And then I started building the Sunset Protocol. Not for me, for the truth. If they were going to drag my name through the dirt and call it restructuring, I was going to make damn sure every dollar they bled showed up in red ink. And if Brad's friends in finance ever opened their eyes, I'd be ready to reintroduce myself. Not as Meredith the legacy system, but as Meredith the reckoning. They called it Project Helios because of course they did. Nothing screams burn rate like naming a software initiative after a Greek sun god. Brad unveiled it like he was pitching the next iPhone. Oversized screens, sleek diagrams, no mention of cost. The whole exec suite practically applauded themselves into a hernia. They didn't see a fragile pile of outsourced spaghetti code, they saw transformation. Helios was supposed to liberate operations from legacy constraints. Translation: fire everyone who understands how things actually work and replace them with polished decks, agile consultants, and 3 full-time brand strategists who think uptime is a skincare term. My former role was sliced into chunks and fed to a Frankenstein org chart with job titles like AI Capability Strategist and Transformation Narrative Owner. The new lead over my old systems was a guy named Evan, mid-30s, bullet point soul, probably thinks root cause analysis is a massage technique. Evan reported to Brad directly. Their first monthly transparency sync to the board was an interpretive dance of lies. My jaw didn't drop, but I did bite through a pen cap. They claimed Helios had already automated 40% of our vendor review process. I knew that wasn't true. I'd built the automation that was supposedly replaced. They couldn't have replicated it. Half of it was patched with undocumented logic that only worked because I understood the quirks of our licensing framework. And then came the compliance deck. They flashed a slide showing streamlined audit integration with a shiny little diagram that omitted one specific logging layer. The same script I'd buried 3 years back after a painful SOC2 debacle, the one that tracked privileged access patterns and generated weekly anomaly deltas. It was gone. That script wasn't just about logging. It timestamped vendor term changes, caught invoice overlaps, flagged unusually high contractor hours, and most importantly, it generated silent alerts for anything that looked like vendor collusion. Now it was missing, not deprecated, erased, which made sense because their vendor onboarding repo had no token access guardrails. They were piping privileged data through unsecured SFTP endpoints and calling it lean. I didn't say anything, not to Brad, not to Evan. I just copied the latest Helios deployment manifest from the shared drive and tucked it into a folder labeled Helios Mirage Claims V1. The CFO still thought Helios was a shiny new gear in a well-oiled machine, but the machine was coughing blood, and I had the oil-stained autopsy ready. The first time I sent a flagged discrepancy, I used a burner alias and a spreadsheet titled like a typo, cost tracking Q2 finest final 3. XLSX. Just another innocent file swimming in a sea of poorly named accounting junk. I knew finance wouldn't raise the alarm right away. That's not their style. They notice, they log, they wait, and I was counting on that. Inside that sheet, just a handful of anomalies. Inconsistent hourly billing rates from one of Helios' golden child contractors, slightly padded invoice quantities, a curious spike in SAW S-seat licenses that didn't match the internal headcount. Tiny things. Like the first cracks in a dam, I didn't sign anything. I didn't need to. The smart analysts, people like Nassim, the quiet math was 3 cubes down from the vending machine, would recognize the fingerprint, because they'd seen my work before, back when things still added up. The reports kept going, once a week, different alias, different format, all breadcrumbs leading to one big loaf of budget rot. Meanwhile, I started skipping meetings. Brad called it low engagement. HR called it a transitionary dip. I called it laying groundwork. The truth was, I didn't need to be in the room to hear the lies. Helios updates had turned into buzzword burlesque, charts with no sources, metrics with no baselines. Evan claimed accelerated synergy uplift in our vendor onboarding KPIs, which meant absolutely nothing, but hey, he said it with confidence. Around week 6, I got a quiet email, no subject line, just a single sentence. Did you know your system tracked $42M in efficiency gains since FY21? It was from Marie, the same controller who once told me to personally flag her if my tools ever got mothballed. She'd found the old reports, auto-generated, time-stamped, undisputed. Some were still quietly running in the background. Brad's team hadn't even realized the demons were alive. I replied, just as quietly, oh, that seems relevant. 2 days later, Helios pushed a critical infrastructure update that broke our contract indexing for 4 hours. Finance got the wrong renewal terms from 3 vendors. A minor hiccup on paper, but I knew what it meant. They were trying to rewire a ship mid-sale and had just pulled the wrong fuse. So I added a new tab to my running tracker, Q3 incidents unreported. Brad still hadn't noticed me. In his eyes, I was checked out. No longer a threat, just a relic collecting dust and severance. But he was right about one thing. I had checked out from his game. I was playing a different one now, one where the quietest alarms ring the loudest if you know where to listen. It was the 3rd Friday in August when the email hit. Subject: internal audit phase out, leadership alignment. Brad's name was at the bottom. Sent company-wide like it was a coupon code. Apparently, the scheduled Q4 internal audit had been postponed indefinitely to reduce operational overhead and prioritize agility. Translation? He'd sweet-talked the C-suite into skipping the one process that could have exposed Project Helios as the cash-incinerating PowerPoint fantasy it was. Save time, he said. I saved the email, then opened an encrypted folder titled Dead Canary Protocol. If Brad wanted a world without audits, fine, but I was going to give that world a ghost. That afternoon, I accidentally walked by the risk management office. On the surface, it looked the same: sterile chairs, muted colors, the faint scent of burnt Nespresso. But tucked in the far left cubicle was Denise. Denise and I go way back. She once shredded a whole vendor contract mid-cycle because I showed her a clause hidden behind a semicolon. The woman didn't blink, just called legal and lit the fuse. So I stopped by her desk, set down a manila envelope, and said, "I think you dropped this." Inside, one page, just one, a table showing our 2021 audit risk tolerance benchmark, and next to it, the projected liability delta for Helios if even one compliance module failed. The number I'd circled, $137 million. Conservative estimate. I walked away, didn't look back. Denise never acknowledged it, didn't need to. Later that night, I logged into the one tool Brad hadn't touched, the Legacy Ops dashboard, affectionately known among my team as the basement. He thought it was deprecated. Hell, everyone did. It was ugly, command line backend, but it still had hooks into the mainframe, and more importantly, I still had root access. There, under the old alert configuration, I spun up a phantom process. A shell script tied to dormant compliance triggers. Gave it a heartbeat, check contractor anomalies, compare active license counts, flag expense deltas. Then I connected it to a buried report module I once used for weekly CFO summaries. And I set the trigger. Report name, exec Q4 reconcile HTML delivery route, secure dashboard node only accessible by the CFO's account. Activation time, October 14th, 8 o'clock a.m., precisely 1 hour before the scheduled all-hands review. Wouldn't look suspicious. Just another alert in the CFO's busy stack. But when it pinged, it would show every missing audit breadcrumb, every unaccounted dollar, every vanished log, and the cherry on top, the AI-powered Helios scripts had overwritten their own error logs, meaning there'd be no paper trail to pin on anyone else. Except Brad, because only one name signed off on Helios audit exemptions, and only one man killed the audit that never happened. They called it a realignment, like my spine had suddenly offended corporate feng shui. The HR email came at 6:42 a.m., before coffee, before sunlight, before decency. Subject line, exciting role evolution opportunity. Inside, as part of our ongoing strategic transformation, we're thrilled to transition you into a high-impact special ops strategy role, where your legacy knowledge can inform future-forward initiatives. Effective Monday. Translation: they'd parked me in a beige purgatory with no reports, no projects, and no real seat at the table. A title made from buzzword roadkill. I walked into HR like I was attending my own funeral. The onboarding packet had clip heart rockets and a quote about disrupting silos. Brad showed up halfway through the welcome chat like a dad who forgot a birthday. Gave a little speech to the room. Meredith has been an integral part of our foundation. Now she'll be helping us optimize our talent architecture as we pivot toward new paradigms. The man actually said optimized talent architecture. I nodded, smiled, said nothing. Then I accepted the shiny new badge, white background, thinner font, special ops strategy tucked awkwardly under my name like a parking ticket. Back at my desk, well, my former desk, which now belonged to a 24-year-old AI implementation fellow named Bryce. I packed the last of my sticky notes, unplugged my dual monitors, and found a quiet corner of the second floor where nobody goes except interns trying to cry in peace. There, I opened a folder titled Exit Payload. It had been growing steadily, like a digital tumor. Inside, Helios vendor overages, duplicate invoice IDs, chat logs with contractors discussing missing audit hooks. Before and after flowchart of the compliance pipeline, Brad's team streamlined into oblivion. At the top, I renamed the master document, Brad FYQ4 Finance Exposure PDF. And just to be thorough, I encrypted a second copy and dropped it into a shared folder only Finance's top controller team could access, accidentally, of course. Hidden beneath 10 layers of budget review files, marked with a harmless name, Variance Review 2023 Final Real XLSX. I didn't need applause, didn't need revenge porn. I just needed Brad to walk into the next quarterly meeting thinking he'd won. Because the best part of being labeled legacy talent, you know exactly where all the ghosts live, and you know how to make them whisper. At first, it was just hallway static, snippets caught near the espresso machine, whispers bleeding through Slack DMs. Did Helios really spend $40K on a UI mockup? Why are we using 3 CRM platforms again? Wait, didn't we already have this feature in the old system? The gloss was cracking. Brad still strutted through the office like the prom king of disruption, grinning in recycled keynote phrases. But behind the scenes, the story was rotting. Project Helios was hemorrhaging cash. One contractor submitted the same weekly report 3 times, billing separately each time, no one noticed. Another billed for 132 hours in a 5-day week. Somehow got approved. The system to track vendor onboarding hadn't worked in 3 weeks. Someone in BizOps rebuilt the old logic in Excel out of sheer desperation. And I didn't say a word, not out loud anyway, but my tips got sharper, more surgical. A quote ID here, an expense code there. All tucked into anonymous sheets with file names like Q3 variance cleanup, Notes V1.2. XLS dropped into shared folders where finance analysts poked around. I didn't direct anything. I just left the breadcrumbs where the right people already looked when things stopped making sense. I knew who read them because I saw the access logs. And I knew when the CFO had finally seen enough because one morning, three quiet things happened. His calendar showed an uncharacteristic block labeled Vendor Exposure Review. The financial controller pinged the DevOps team to re-enable legacy system read access for baseline comparisons. Denise from Risk sent me a one-word message. Humming? It meant the fuse is lit. Brad, blissfully unaware, had started prepping for Q4 accolades. He was already name-dropping Helios in strategy decks, angling for a VP expansion, even test-running his year in review blurb for the press team. Meanwhile, the thing he thought he'd replaced, the ugly, outdated legacy core, was humming in the background. Quietly, consistently, logging his downfall in real time. I watched it all from my corner cubicle with the dying fluorescent bulb and the broken chair nobody bothered to fix. The CFO hadn't said a word to me. Not yet, but he didn't have to. The questions were finally being asked, and I'd made sure every answer led to the same name. Brad. The subject line hit like a starting gun. Company-wide strategic update attendance required. No warning, no agenda. Just a surprise all hands jammed into everyone's calendar at 8 o'clock a.m. sharp on a Wednesday, because nothing says we're totally in control like a last-minute summons before people have their second cup of coffee. Brad was ecstatic. I know this because he'd been humble bragging across 3 different Slack channels for days, dropping not-so-subtle hints like, Q4 is about to be historic. Big wins, big visibility. Raising hands and my personal favorite, Helios isn't just the future, it's my future. He'd even messaged a few mid-level managers asking for talking points about how Helios helped streamline legacy bloat. One of them forwarded me the message with the note, pretty sure he thinks he's getting promoted. I'd almost feel bad, almost. Instead, I just leaned back in my rickety chair and opened the encrypted inbox I hadn't touched since April. One new message, no subject, just a sender ID I hadn't seen since the risk audit 3 years ago. Finance's quiet oracle, Marie. Still allergic to punctuation. Slide 6, you'll enjoy it. I didn't smile, not yet. My pulse kicked once, then settled into a slow, steady thrum. I showed up early, like a good little relic, and took a seat in the back row of the multipurpose room they called the atrium, because apparently ugly beige with sad ficus didn't test well in surveys. Brad was already at the front, shaking hands, doing his charming schmuck routine. He wore a new blazer, navy, with those ridiculous elbow patches. His laptop was open. His hair was freshly product-head. Kept touching the clicker like it was a talisman. I could hear him whispering to Evan they're going to flip over slide 3. Watch the room light up. I just sipped my coffee and waited. No notepad, no laptop, just me, my badge, and a mental checklist of sins. The CFO walked in exactly on time, flanked by the usual ghostly entourage of legal and finance. No tie, no smile. Just that tight, clipped look he got when the quarterly books didn't line up. He nodded once and started the meeting without fanfare. No company anthem, no Brad intro. Slide 1, revenue growth, big spike, muted applause. Slide 2, market expansion. Brad nodded like a proud dad. Slide 3, AI acceleration. Brad clicked his pen, almost spoke. The CFO moved on without pausing. Slide 4, contractor headcount. No numbers, just a pie chart that looks suspiciously like 3 pizzas stacked sideways. Slide 5, FY efficiency objectives. Mostly jargon. Brad straightened up. This was his lead-in. Then came slide 6. Big, bold, blood red. $137,442,188 non-recoverable transition cost plus compliance liability. Q3 Q4 the air left the room like a punctured tire. No bullet points, no graphs, just a number. A number that meant someone somewhere had screwed the pooch so hard the pooch had filed a harassment claim. No one breathed. The CFO didn't speak, didn't need to. He just turned slowly and looked at Brad. Dead on, like a gun turret locking its target. I didn't move, didn't blink, just tapped my badge against my coffee cup. And thought, God, I love Marie. The applause hit like clockwork, polite, corporate, utterly hollow. Slide 5 had just wrapped, record revenue, double-digit growth. Phrases like market confidence and strong pipeline acceleration still echoed in the air like air freshener sprayed over a rotting fish. Brad was glowing, absolutely beaming. You'd think the man had invented capitalism. He took a half step forward, one foot hovering like he was preparing to speak. Maybe a bow, maybe a smug little interjection about leadership alignment. I saw him gesture slightly toward the CFO's laptop, like he thought now was his moment. The CFO didn't break stride, didn't look up. He clicked to slide 6, and just left it there. Red, bold, immovable. $137,442,188 non-recoverable transition cost plus compliance risk. That number sat there like a loaded gun. No chart, no fluff, just loss. The room, dead. You could hear someone's pen roll off a desk 2 rows back and hit the floor like a gunshot. Someone near the window coughed and immediately regretted it. Brad opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Evan. Evan was staring at his shoes like they might open and swallow him whole. The CFO didn't move for a long beat. Then slowly he turned his head and locked eyes with Brad, and that's all he did. No accusations, no speech, just that look, that finance look. The kind that says we know, we've known, and now everyone else knows too. Brad's lips twitched. His hand shifted toward the clicker like he could maybe backpedal or skip ahead. The CFO didn't blink. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God, that was my cue." I leaned back in my chair, let my spine rest in that unforgiving mesh like I was watching the final act of a Greek tragedy I didn't write, but damn sure helped stage. In my bag, nothing. No notes, no laptop, no victory speech. Didn't need one. I'd already spoken. In line items, in license trails, in invisible scripts buried 3 directories deep. In compliance reports disguised as bugs. In audit gaps I let quietly widen until they became chasms. And now, finance was doing the talking, not for ego, not for show. Just the cold, righteous poetry of accountability written in 9 figures in Helvetica bold. Brad was still standing, but you could see the wind leave him. His posture cracked. His eyes darted. Not a single exec made eye contact with him. Even Evan had begun slowly backing toward the door like a man reconsidering his career path. The slide never advanced. The CFO closed the laptop without a word. Meeting over, no follow-up, no Q&A, just the silent, surgical execution of a career wrapped in a single, elegant slide. I walked out without a sound. No smirk, no final glance. I didn't need to burn anything down. He'd done that all by himself. I just made sure finance left the lights on so everyone could watch. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.